Before we begin, we're going to open our time for some announcements, if there are any. And one announcement that I want to really emphasize and encourage you to attend is that next Tuesday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. at Second Baptist, we're having kind of our third session of the Interfaith Summit. You will all recall that this summer there were gatherings. We heard from the executive director out of UT Austin on the separation of church and state. Our conversations have been about looking forward in exactly the kind of work that we're doing, that kind of collaboration and partnering within the faith community, government entities, nonprofits, but to have the community own that even more. And how do we continue doing this great work, but take it even to the next level? How do we make it sustainable for future generations? So this kind of work didn't just happen, what we've been doing for the last half a dozen plus years. I mean, we could sit here and tell history this morning about the decades it's kind of taken us to get to this point. But I know from my own daughters and granddaughters and sons and theirs that in 2050, I hope that this kind of work is going not only strong, but is leading the city in its work, because it is such community work. And how strong and powerful that could be even for our civic leaders, to have such a strong community that our civic leaders know where to go and to find out how people need to be led and what needs to happen. And so we're trying to take it to the next level. So I encourage you, I will find the registration link. We are asking for a $5 donation. Second Baptist is cooking that night, and so we want to at least offset their expenses. So I really hope you come. We're at the point of looking at identity and structure and sustainability, and we're trying to also think about it in different ways. And so we need, imagination, innovation. So please come, and I'll put that into chat. Other announcements that someone might have. I'll come up with more, obviously.
And this is Doug Beach. I have an
Doug?
announcement. Put it in the chat. Saturday, September 28th is the 17th annual NAMI Walks at Morgan's Wonderland. It's going to be a family event with everybody, and it's a wonderful event where, we'll probably have about 1,000 people come out to the stadium and to Morgan's Wonderland to help create a welcoming and inclusive environment for people who are impacted by mental health. So we hope to see everybody out there, and you can sign up for a team. I put the link in the chat. You just have to click there, go to the website, and you can register as a team.
Thanks, Doug. Now we probably have time for one more announcement.
I have a quick one.
Go.
So first of all, Sacred has a team at the NAMI Walk, so we'll see you out there, Doug. So Sacred we've been working on a redesign of the guided interview of our mental health portal. This portal was the first one that we did. We released it over about 3 years ago, if you can believe it's been that long. So, but we have worked on kind of a new interface on the way that interview works, which we think really makes the tool better. And so anyway, we're looking for people to do a preview on that before we start releasing it to the public. So I'm going to post my email address in the chat. If you want to do a preview on that and take a look, then we'd love for you to do that. The way that works is typically we'll send you a link with a couple of scenarios, and then invite you to walk through the guided interview and just kind of tell us what you think. So using a survey form. So if you want to do that, you can contact me, and we'd love your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And that's a perfect transition. And I even you sure that, oh no, it's the mental health that was 3 years ago. So Sacred's been longer. But I think our guest this morning, who's bringing the briefing, Katie Wilson, was one of the first people who said yes to Sacred in her role. and help give that kickstart to having Sacred as a whole come into being. There are a lot of conversations with different organizations and, working towards partnerships and what this could mean to our resourcing in San Antonio. And it wasn't called Close to Home at the time. It's called Sarah. But Katie said yes, and it really was that next step that moved it forward. So Katie and I served together at Haven for Hope many moons ago. And I'm just so proud of what she's doing. I look at people that I served with at Haven and the ways they are leading in other places. I'm just real proud. If nothing else, Haven's a really good learning zone for leadership. So Katie, I'm going to hand it over to you, and maybe you can even tell us why you changed the name to Close to Home.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. So thank you. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Katie Wilson. I've been with Close to Home, which used to be the South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless, or SARA, for about 9 years. I've been the executive director for about, since 2020. It's been a blur, about 5 years now. And yeah, so we went through the rebrand. My first day working at SARA in 2015, myself and the previous executive director were talking about what should the new name be, because we knew we weren't planning to be a regional organization. We really wanted to focus on San Antonio and Bexar County and the needs here. And also person-centered language is very important to us. Just like harm reduction language, we're saying people who have a substance use order. So same with homelessness. We say people who are experiencing homelessness, because we've heard from both people moving out of homelessness and our partners that limiting somebody to their current condition is very disempowering, that they're a person first and they're more than their circumstance. And so our previous name had "For the Homeless" in the name, so we knew we had to make a change. And so we worked together with our board and all of our partners to change the name to Close to Home, so that it really felt like we are focusing on getting people back to home and not on their current circumstance. And also, I think it's an issue that is close to home for all of us. Many of us know somebody who's experienced housing insecurity in some form. So we changed our name about a year ago, and I can pull up the presentation and explain a little bit more about our organization and then what we're working on right now. Are you able to see the slides here?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. So who we are at Close to Home. So one misconception might be we don't provide any direct service. Although our mission is to ensure everyone has a place to call home, we have a unique role as the regional coordinating body around homelessness in San Antonio and Bexar County. So not only are we a nonprofit, but we have a designation from HUD to be that local coordinator to make sure that we're building a system to address homelessness, identifying gaps, and really looking at need and how we're all kind of interconnected to improve our homeless response system. So some of those key functions for Close to Home: one is to lead a strategic planning effort that includes both the city, the county, and then over 60 different partner agencies that we work with, who we now call the Alliance to House Everyone, because we wanted our group of partners to have their own kind of identity. So as they advocate for things or move policy forward, we're really clear when we're talking about Close to Home or our partners, the Alliance. We also facilitate HUD funding coming into the community. We apply for it every year. Oh, I just got some feedback. There we go. And so we've really been able to increase this funding. When I started in 2015, it was about 8 million. Now we're up to 22 million due to that strong performance we have as an interconnected system. That's really how we're evaluated by HUD for this funding. We produce local reports on gaps and trends that are used both locally by the city, the county, and our partners for planning to understand what's happening with homelessness, but they're also used at the federal level to tell the story of what's happening in San Antonio and across the nation for policymaking. We really work with our partners to make sure we have community-wide policy for how we all operate. So I'll talk more about the homeless response system, but there are a lot of pieces that have to be connected together. And we think a critical way of doing that is having common policies and standards that all of the agencies are familiar with, so that somebody that is seeking help knows exactly what to expect, and we all know how to work together, and that stands the test of time. Whether people change positions, it's not just relationally based, it's there in policy. And we provide technical assistance to partners to help improve their programs. We also manage our local coordinated entry model, which is called HomeLink, which is basically a connected system. So anybody seeking help, whether it's through the hotline, a shelter, an outreach worker, if they're unsheltered, they're getting connected to all of the different programs that are available to them. And then we run some of our own programs that you might hear about or that might be useful to you, but they're really for our partners. So we manage about 650 vouchers that our partners can access. We manage a huge diversion fund, which is there for people on their first day of homelessness. If we're able to resolve their circumstance with some flexible funding, we have that available for partners throughout the year, and that's reached about $500,000. It's been really successful as an intervention so that people don't have to enter the shelter system, and then kind of we can quickly resolve that circumstance. And so we're really there to keep the pieces connected, and to fill gaps for our partners and kind of take on roles that make sense for a neutral kind of facilitator to do. And so just a little bit more about our name change. So Close to Home is the name of our nonprofit. Our agency name is the coordinating agency. And then the Alliance to House Everyone is our name for our partners and the owners of our community strategic plan. And this became really important because we're seeing more and more that it's beneficial when we all band together to advocate for things together. So a great example is there was a permanent supportive housing project a few months ago, the Commons at Asakia Trails, and we notified our members, and we're all there to talk about the benefits of permanent supportive housing, why it was so critical. And so we really are seeing more and more that there's strength in numbers. And so if we can all align around certain efforts, we can really move the ball forward as a system and make a bigger impact. And so this is just to show you all of the range of the different partners that we work with. We're happy to have any of you join as well, which we'll give you a link at the end. If you're interested in being part of this, we have a huge governance structure tackling different issues, whether it's youth homelessness or technical issues coming up, so that we're all really working together. And so when I talk about a homeless response system, I'm not just talking about shelter or outreach. It's really all of the pieces that are needed to make a difference when it comes to homelessness. So we've got prevention, which is we have programming to help prevent people from falling into homelessness or from, at the point of eviction, what's available to them. Then we have street outreach and shelter and temporary housing, which is really to keep people safe and supported while they're in that crisis circumstance. And then ultimately to resolve homelessness, we need housing. So that could be rapid rehousing, that could be permanent supportive housing, a voucher, and also just the stability of the housing market and the availability of units that are affordable really impacts this system. So more and more we've stepped into being there as a voice of what's happening on the homelessness side due to what's happening locally with housing. And so right now we're in the 5th year of our community's homeless strategic plan. So this is just to give you kind of a timeline of where we are. We worked closely with the city to launch a community plan to address homelessness in 2020. In 2025, we'll be in the final year of that plan. So we're working closely right now with our alliance partners on what do we want to hone in and focus on next year to make the biggest impact. And next year, we'll be working on our next 5-year plan to address homelessness, which is really exciting. And we've made so much progress. And so just to give you kind of a sense of some of the things that have happened over the last 4 years, we have had a reduction in unsheltered homelessness since 2020. Although it's not consistent every year, there's been a drop overall. 100,000 people were kept housed during the pandemic. We were awarded a $14 million grant from HUD just last year to address unsheltered homelessness. We've launched a skilled nursing pilot to help people who can't meet their activities of daily living. Another huge effort was the housing bond process at the city. The first of its kind $150 million housing bond, of which 25 million was specifically to address homelessness with permanent supportive housing. We've launched low barrier shelter programs as a community, new programs for youth and young adults, including a drop-in center. We've seen increases in domestic violence funding. So there's been a lot of work and a lot of progress over the last 4 years. And I think we're only getting better each year at exactly where we need to right size and what resources we need to keep making that progress. And so just to give you an idea, looking ahead to next year, these are the major focus areas that our alliance is workshopping the strategies for right now. So we're looking at homelessness prevention because we know families and older adults are struggling with staying housed currently, and we need more alignment around funding and how we prevent homelessness. We're looking at healthcare needs, and this includes mental health care and how we reach people better who are unsheltered, maximizing and expanding housing options that are available. We specifically at Close to Home are looking at putting together a landlord engagement program so that we have incentives and marketing to help people who are moving out of homelessness get connected to housing opportunities more quickly. We're looking specifically at our youth and young adult system, our domestic violence coordination to make sure people are able to safely access services across all of the different hotlines and shelters that are available. We're looking at what we need to do to address inequities that we're seeing in the system and also accessibility issues. Is everybody, regardless of their disabling condition, able to access services in the same way? Looking to evaluate that. We want to improve local training, and we just in the last month have launched a training portal called the Alliance Training Portal for all of our partners that have pathways of training depending on their role, so that we can continue to improve the quality of the services and case management that are provided across all of our different partners. And then continuing to enhance our street outreach coordination efforts, which there's been a lot of progress in this area, but just making sure that we're really reaching the most vulnerable on a regular basis to build those relationships and get them connected to housing. And so another update I'd like to give you is our point in time count. So if you're not familiar with this, it's a one-night census basically count that we do every year of how many people are experiencing homelessness. And so we count everybody who's in our emergency shelters, and we send out volunteer teams to count everybody who's unsheltered and use this information to create a community report and a report for HUD. And it's also a great opportunity to engage new people in our efforts so they can see the work that's happening. They can hand out supplies and build those relationships with people. And so our upcoming count, we haven't officially announced the date, but it'll be in late January if anybody's interested in participating. It's a really meaningful experience. So here are some of the things we saw in our last point in time count. Since last year, we've had about a 1.6% increase in how many people are unsheltered or on the street. Now that is a very low percentage. That accounts for about 14 people. So we feel like that was pretty successful in keeping that stabilized, even when we were seeing such challenges with getting people housed and keeping people housed over the last year. Our major increase in the count came from shelter, but we also expanded our shelters that are available over the last year. But if you look year over year, we've seen decreases in homelessness still overall. And something really neat about San Antonio and our unique system here is that 73% of our population is in shelter. This is not typical for other major cities. They see much higher unsheltered numbers. And so although we all struggle with homelessness, we're able to provide a safer situation for many more people than other major cities. And so as you can see, overall, the unsheltered count has decreased by 25% over the last 5 years. We've also had a lot of success working with our veterans, and that was an early initiative when Close to Home was Sarah, was to really focus and rally around housing as many veterans as possible and building a system where we could check on them regularly. And so in this last count, we actually saw the lowest number of unsheltered veterans we'd ever seen since we started that challenge. And so it just shows that if you can kind of tackle a problem piece by piece with all of the right partners, you can see declines in homelessness. The challenge is that veterans have certain resources like healthcare, specific vouchers that other populations don't have in the same way, but we can build that over time and advocate for those things. I also want to mention that children were our fastest growing population. And so that goes back to homelessness prevention, because many families are struggling to make ends meet. They're paying for food and healthcare and other expenses, and housing is falling behind. So that's why we really want to prevent families with children from even falling into homelessness in the first place, and looking at strategies that are further upstream. So quickly, just so you can see what our unsheltered count looks like by district, we did see a decline in how many people were counted within city council districts. And so there has been some work over the last year for the county to start to fund outreach in the smaller municipalities, because we think that they're seeing increases there because they haven't had the same kind of outreach support. So that's starting to happen. And then you can see the majority of homelessness in San Antonio is in District 1, which is near and around downtown, District 2, and District 5. So if you'd like to read our full state of homelessness report, there's a link here, a QR code. You can also find it on our website, but it really gives you both the point in time count numbers, but in context of all of the work that's happened over the last 4 years, and other community data like the status of poverty report, what's happening with housing, and how all of these things kind of play in together. And so just to kind of reiterate HomeLink, if that's a new term for you, this is really our coordinated system to connect people to different housing options. And so they could be exiting or discharging from an institution or hospital, or the criminal justice system. They could be unsheltered. They could be calling the hotline at the city. And regardless, they're getting the same common assessment and connected to as many options as possible. Now, that said, we don't have an immediate option for everyone's needs, but it gives us a really good idea of where the gaps are. And so when we're constantly pushing for things like supportive housing for people that have disabling conditions, that's because we can see in our numbers that this is moving very slowly because there are very few openings for that resource. And so it gives us a much better idea of what we need across the whole system. And so part of how we get people connected to HomeLink is through the hotline and all of the different shelters and access points. And we also hand out these resource cards. So if in the future y'all would like to have some, we have a QR code of all the different ways to access HomeLink. All the shelters, regardless of the entry point, they'll get connected to the same process. And so here then, if you don't have the hotline number saved, I know you had a presentation recently from the homeless administrator, but that's a great way to get somebody started. If they're in need of help, you can also connect them, of course, through 311, and Homeless Outreach has an email as well that you can use. But I get people reach out every single day to our staff, and we're constantly connecting them to the hotline. Or if they're a family with children, definitely referring them to Haven for Hope, since they still have been able to maintain their policy that they won't turn away a family with children. So regardless of the time of day, that's always an option. So I want to tell y'all quickly about a new initiative we have. They're called Billy Bundles. So we sadly had a member of our team pass away last year that was very special to us, and I think to many of you too. But something that he always did was have a Ziploc bag in his car full of snacks and a couple of hygiene items and our resource cards. And so our staff observed, if they ever rode with him, that he always had this with him. And so when we were thinking of ways to kind of keep his legacy alive and continue to honor him, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we continue to create these Billy bundles and really were able to answer the question for people, what do I do when I see somebody experiencing homelessness? Which is a common question that we get, because we don't necessarily want to recommend that you hand out money. That's, there's pros and cons to that, right? But it is important to still make people feel seen and that moment of dignity that, okay, you see me, I'm not just like a part of the structures around, which can be very dehumanizing and harder for people to make progress. And we've heard that from people moving out of homelessness, that it's very traumatizing to feel like unseen as a human being. And so we're raising money in the big give for Billy Bundles, but our plan is that this is something we can tell people they can do to help. We can hand them out at neighborhood meetings and community meetings. And the resource card is really critical, because then we're making sure we're not only addressing an immediate need, but we're getting them connected to the resources that can help them ultimately resolve their homelessness.
Mm.
And so here are just a few ways you can stay connected with us. You can go through our website or Facebook. We have a monthly newsletter where we share lots of different community updates and kind of what's happening with our strategic plans. You can volunteer typically with us. That's going to be the point in time count, but we have our full list of partners on our website if you want to get engaged with an organization. And then if you have an agency that's interested in being part of all these conversations and planning, you can join Membership Council or the Alliance through our website. And then we always put this here for anybody that may not have toured Haven for Hope. It's just such a big part of our system that they offer tours every Thursday at 9 a.m. So if you haven't had a chance to go out there, it's a great way to get engaged. And so that's what I have to share with you all. Just wanted to give you a high level of some of the data and challenges we're looking at, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, one, thank you, Katie. That was so thorough. I learned a lot of stuff and updates and movement. It was really good to see. One that stuck out was the increase in domestic violence prevention and funding. I'm like, wow, that's significant, you know. And I didn't know if you knew, but there is a domestic violence portal within Sacred. So maybe there could be a conversation around that particular portal and what you know. And so I think helping even the other components of Sacred grow and develop. And so that's just one idea that went through my head. We're going to take just a little pause here at 8:27 and thank everyone for coming this morning. So if you need to get on with your day, that's okay. And it's this briefing, like all the previous ones, are being recorded, and they're all going to be online, like a library. In fact, they might already be there. I didn't get a chance to check this morning, but you'd be able to send people there, utilize it yourself, or a presentation in your congregation or organization. You could go to one of the recordings, and you could show what Katie has done this morning without having to remember what Katie said. Just bring up the recording. And I know a lot of you out there do that. And so all of this, and Katie, you just really emphasized what the intersection is all about. It's all about connections. So even in the Billy bags, you're making connections, you know, and what all of that means is that we're building community together, you know, a community that cares and works together. And the next series in this briefing updates is going to be on immigration and refugees. And that'll start next week. So we'll get updates on how that system is working. Katie, and then I'm just going to open it up. I have not looked into chat. There might be something there, but you might not be able to answer this. But if you did have, you know, that magic wand, you know, that we all wish we had for so many of, you know, our vulnerable needs out there. But lots of times we've found that if there were like a small tweak in a system, you know, like it could change everything, right? So if you had that magic wand, what would be that one thing that would really, at this point in time, make a difference in the whole system? It's just really amazing to see what system we do have and that we didn't have a decade ago, 15 years ago, right? You know, we've come a long way. So you might want to think about that, or if you have an answer, that'd be lovely. I'll check chat right now, though.
Well, I think three things come to mind for the magic wand, because I don't think it can be just one thing that will change everything with homelessness, because there are so many different circumstances. But if I can pick three, one would be that we had a homelessness prevention fund that was large enough to be available year round for anybody facing eviction that didn't have a way to pay to keep people housed in the first place. The second would be that we immediately met all of our affordable housing goals in the strategic housing implementation plan, because that would mean we met our goal of not having people who are lower income and also severely cost burdened with housing. And then the third would be we have immediately 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing, because for those that are unsheltered, that have co-occurring conditions and things like that, they just need that ongoing supportive service, and that's not widely available yet. We're making progress. The opening of Town Twin and the progress there. Sam Ministries is developing new properties, but it takes time, and we need those units today. And there may be some that could sustain long-term eventually, but for our most vulnerable, they need that on-site clinical support, case management. So those would be my three with the magic wand, but they're all doable, right? I mean, they all can be done with focus and everybody's awareness. I think what's hard is with homelessness, people want an immediate fix, and there is no immediate fix, but there are solutions and we can make progress, but people have to have the patience that we have to build these things out together.
Peter, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Sam.
Hi.
Hey, Katie.
Hey.
Good to see you again. Great work. Very thorough presentation. I want to thank you for leading the Housing Bond Committee. I know you were one of the chairs along with former Councilwoman Shirley Gonzalez, and you spoke to the permanent supportive housing, and of course, having those funds wasn't enough funds, but how do you feel about how it's been implemented, and with a real focus on, and I shared this with Mark when he was on with us, which is the supportive services. And I know that's what makes it, that's the secret sauce to the supportive services. And of course, across the board with affordable housing. How do you feel as the monies have been spent and how we're incorporating that supportive services? And I'm really impressed with, and I wasn't aware of, and would like to know more about the HomeLink and how, if they're navigators that are directly involved in the actual case management. I might have missed a little bit of that when you were explaining it. So much information is more, like Ann said, got to go back and listen to it again. But those are my two questions. What do you think about the bond, the way it rolled out, specifically on the supportive services side? And, and even without going into the next bond, what do we do different?
Sure. Well, I've been really pleased with who has been funded and how the permanent supportive housing funding has been implemented with the partners selected. So I believe all of the bond funding has gone to Sam Ministries and Town Twin, who are very experienced service providers and understand the services that it takes. I think the challenge from here to ramp up for a 2027 bond is to make sure we have other agencies with capacity to provide those services and partner with a developer and a building operator and making those connections so that we're ready to expand if the funding is there. There are other cities that have larger kind of infrastructure to develop housing. And so I think that's got to be a focus. But I've been very pleased with what I've seen, and the outcomes speak for themselves. I mean, compared to other interventions, permanent supportive housing, the retention is about 98% of people that stay stably housed. And so, and your question about HomeLink. So HomeLink's just really the name of the process. We train everybody who is a HomeLink assessor to be able to go through that workflow, ask the questions. And we actually do connect everybody to Sacred at the end of the assessment process, because we know we may not have an immediate housing intervention for them. So that's been interconnected there as well, that the assessor then goes through and looks at options in Sacred. But we're really building this out to include now referrals to things like skilled nursing, to benefit income. We're looking at ways we can partner with Ready to Work and employment agencies so that we're really making as many connections in that assessment as possible. But really the assessors are the partners that that have been trained on it.
Great work. I like the way you set up the alliance as well, giving them their own track to coordinate. But thank you. Well done.
Katie,
Hey.
who's next?
Bill, you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Katie, congratulations on all the success you've had over these last years building up the program there at Close to Home. Really, really appreciate it. What is happening with rapid rehousing? Can you talk about that? Did that kind of stabilize, or is it still increasing, or let us
Yes.
know about that.
Okay, so rapid rehousing came about with the Hearth Act in about 2008, when lots of families and people, because of the housing bubble, were falling into homelessness for the first time. And so they said, let's create a program where we can quickly get people back into housing, pay their rent, provide case management, get them stabilized, and then be able to help the next person. And they saw more success with that program and how efficient it was than they were even expecting. And so it's been a really great intervention for somebody that just needs a few months of support to get stabilized again. So it's basically housing people in community, but then providing support for their first up to 2 years while they're in the community. It's a very successful intervention as well. We had a lot of additional funding for rapid rehousing with the CARES Act during COVID, and we were able to place hundreds of people back into units with that support. Since that money has run out, we actually have less funding and programming for rapid rehousing than we did in 2020. So that's another compounding factor for our families, our ability to get people into housing. And we actually do use it as a bridge while people are waiting for permanent supportive housing now too to be developed. But it's another area where we'd love to see the level of assistance during COVID provided every year, because we're able to house so many people due to that level of assistance.
One thing I appreciate too, Katie, about the work at Close to Home and you, is that there's such an educational component, such a learning that comes with it. I don't know about others, but just listening to this morning, it's not just numbers I'm learning. It's the why and what does work and the movement of it. So I really appreciate that. I think that's such an important component of a stronger community, that we know why we're doing things and what kind of movement that creates. We're smart people, and that's how this is going to work, is making those connections and using our smarts, right? And working together.
Right.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I think,
well,
and also
ahead, Katie.
Just one thing I didn't mention specifically that's so important is just the community making the connection between housing and homelessness. That there is there's a direct connection there. And so part of our work that's kind of woven throughout all of the priorities is working on reframing conversations around affordable housing. How can we get more community support for housing development in areas where we need it, for people who need it? And even today at 2 o'clock, there's a vote for a development in District 10 called Vista Park that's going to be, hopefully, if approved for zoning, have free pre-K for all of the residents that live there and the surrounding community. And so, but I think people take these two issues separately, but you really can't solve homelessness without housing. It just won't work. As wonderful as a system as you may build out, you have to have a place people can live and that they can afford. So I just think that's really important too, in an area where we're still learning and working a lot.
Yeah, but you just also shared some innovation and an imagination, to provide things like pre-K, right? And kindergarten those are the kind of things that are going to create community at the same time. And community also helps heal community. So it's kind of like, it's all connected, but if a forest burns down, if you come back later, you'll see that it's starting to grow again and it heals itself. So community does the same thing. The stronger we are in our relationships and the connectedness and critical thinking, we can start to heal and make those solutions happen in our geography, right? And we're going to need more and more of that. The larger that we grow geographically, the more we need community, in place for all of us and for others. Any other thoughts, questions, other than lots of gratitude for Katie spending her morning with us? So thank you, Katie, for your leadership and for being with us today. We really appreciate you and Close to Home.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks all. We'll see you next week. Have great weekends.